we got through the first phase. That was the whole point of the flatten the curve. I never said that we were not going to have to deal with the virus. It wasn't going away.
For the first time since the start of the pandemic, Governor Ron DeSantis is sitting down for a one-on-one interview. He sat down for an hour today with CBS 4's Jim DeFede.
Among other things, the governor stands by his handling of the crisis and says the jury is still out on masks. Jim joins us live now. And Jim, what else did the governor have to say?
You know, we wanted to cover a lot of areas, and we did, but one of the things that I really wanted to focus on was this notion of, you know, how he's handled it, and more importantly, how he's been perceived to be handling it. So one of the things that I brought up with him was the Washington Post, as well as a lot of people, claim that he is tethered, that's the word the Post used, tethered to the Trump administration in following their lead on everything according to the pandemic. Here's what he had to say.
Yeah. Well, first of all, that's just a phony narrative. I mean, they were trying to say some of the decisions I made had something to do. I had no contact on a lot of these decisions, so we're doing what's best for Florida. I will say that they've been a great ally for Florida. I mean, when we've needed help, so for example, some of the hospitals were running low on the remdesivir, which is a therapeutic, because, you know, we had a lot of hospital admissions a couple weeks ago, and there's a big bureaucratic process involved with that. I was able to pick up the phone, call the president, and say, Mr. President, I know they're supposed to come a week from now. I need it in 3 days. And guess what? They showed up in 3 days.
Well, last week was the deadliest week that the state of Florida had. I think 4 of the days last week they set records. We set records on the number of deaths. Where do you see things today?
Well, one, I mean, I think it was a rough week to have those reports. I would say, though, that when they're reporting, that's not that the fatalities necessarily occur. They've been kind of occurring. We know when we started to see the surge of people going into the EDs, the hospitalizations increased. You know, then unfortunately, you know, we were going to see some painful outcomes. Although I will say, if you look at the recovery rates, comparing Florida to some other places that have been hit, people are actually recovering too. And I think that story doesn't always get out there.
The Sun Sentinel ran an editorial, "Help us out, Governor DeSantis, we're dying here." And they wrote, "Your daily upbeat message is at odds with what Floridians are going through." Do you think that you have tended to try to find positive elements at the risk of sounding out of touch?
Absolutely not. I mean, first of all, everything that's presented typically is presented negative. So there's a lot of negative that people have. And I've always said that
but from you?
Well, right. So I've always said it. I've always talked about this being a serious challenge. You know, when we saw the increases in hospitalizations, we surged personnel down. We're getting remdesivir. We're always responsive to what's going on. And we understand what families are going through. I mean, for example, some of the protective measures we've done with nursing homes. That has saved lives because we've kept virus from spreading more than it would have. But we haven't had visitation for these folks since the middle of March. That is a huge human cost to families who just would like to be able to have that human contact. So I understand how difficult the situation is, but I think there's also the question, do you want to be in a defeatist posture, or do you want to be in a posture that say, you know what, we're Americans, we can handle this, we've handled difficult things before, we are going to get through this, and we shouldn't let fear overcome our sense of purpose.
A cynic might say that your change of tone matches the fact that your poll numbers have dropped.
I've not taken a poll since I've been governor, believe it or not. So I didn't care about them when they're there. As a leader, you've got to lead. And particularly at a time when there's a lot of fear and apprehension, obviously it's being driven in certain directions. There's a lot of partisanship.
That press availability you had with the vice president on May 20th, where you said, we've succeeded and people don't want to recognize it because it challenges their narrative, it challenges their assumption, so they got to try and find a boogeyman, maybe black helicopter circling the Department of Health. Since you said that basically we had succeeded, an additional 450,000 people have now tested positive and more than 5,000 people have died. What happened?
So we got through the first phase. That was the whole point of the flatten the curve. I never said that we were not going to have to deal with the virus. It wasn't going away. Now, we didn't know when we would have to face any type of surge, but we saw it just like all the other states in our region saw it towards the end of June. But you know what? We were prepared for it. We had the systems in place. We had the resources in place. It's not been easy.
But I want to just stay with the idea of the message that you sent on May 20th and whether or not your positive message that we've succeeded basically gave people the impression that the battle was over, we had won, and that people could go about their lives again, which then also caused the resurgence to happen.
Oh, but that's okay. You know, that's one little clip. But then what about all the actions we were taking during that time? I mean, if I thought it was over, I wouldn't have set up all the COVID-only nursing facilities. I wouldn't have done all these new test sites. I wouldn't have sent, you know, more PPE to the nursing homes. So we continue to act and continue to prepare for the virus to resurge.
Do you think that you could have done more in terms of communicating the idea that everyone in Florida should be wearing a mask? I don't want to have to mandate it, but everyone must start wearing masks.
Well, we have communicated. I mean, when I put it out there when we first added it to our guidelines, no one was talking about it at the time. It was almost like, I don't even know if it made any news because it wasn't political yet. And so we do want everyone to do that, particularly in close contact. But I also think it's important to just be honest with people. You know, the mask, there's a lot of disagreement in the scientific literature about how much protection that gives you. So I just don't want people to think that you do the mask to the exclusion of all the other stuff.
Elliot, Lauren, I think what you see with the governor and the impression that I get is he still has struggles internally. He wants to sort of give one message, but he gives a contradictory message sometimes. Yes, he says that we're supposed to be wearing masks, but then he questions whether or not masks are truly effective. He talks about the positive attitudes about certain things. There's this constant struggle that he's having within himself that I think is part of the reason why his efforts to communicate to the citizens of Florida have been so ham-fisted in some ways that have led to a lot of the criticism that he's been facing. He has not had a clearly defined message. He's trying to redefine that. I think the fact that he sat down with me is an effort, a recognition on the governor's staff's part that they know that their messaging has not been good and that they need to try to do a better job. But at the end of the day, it rests on the governor to deliver that message, and he's still having trouble doing that. We're going to have a lot more of this interview in the days to come. But I think you get a sense of where we're going.